Listen carefully. Spiritual attacks follow schedules. They obey windows. They wait for silence. I speak this with clarity, not fear. Years inside dark systems teach patterns. Patterns repeat. Timing decides outcomes. This message comes from lived exposure, not rumor. Ritual work relies on hours, not emotions. Assignments move when attention sleeps. Power shifts when order changes. Calm authority breaks systems faster than shouting ever could. Many people pray sincerely and still face resistance. The issue is not belief. The issue is alignment. Spiritual realms respond to structure. Certain hours carry weight. Other hours carry permission. Ignoring this truth leaves doors open. Tonight, this teaching pulls back a veil. 3 prayer times will be revealed, not symbolic times, not traditional habits, exact windows used by both sides of the spiritual realm. These times dismantle assignments before they mature. They interrupt monitoring. They collapse plans already in motion. This knowledge matters because attacks rarely look dramatic. They arrive as confusion, as delay, as unexplained fatigue, as repeated patterns that refuse to break. Timing exposes the source. Timing restores authority. This is not about panic. This is about order. Discipline outranks intensity. Consistency outperforms noise. Quiet obedience dismantles complex systems. Stay focused. Each moment shared ahead carries weight. Each truth builds on the next. Skipping understanding weakens impact. Receiving in order brings clarity. By the end, prayer will no longer feel random. It will feel positioned. It will feel deliberate. It will feel effective. Welcome to Holy Authority. This channel exists to restore spiritual order and calm power. Subscribe now and remain connected to teachings that sharpen discernment and strengthen authority. Timing governs spiritual systems. Nothing moves randomly. Nothing strikes without permission. Witchcraft functions on clocks, not chaos. Assignments are released when resistance is lowest and awareness is thin. Silence is not empty in the spiritual realm. Silence is active. It becomes a window. This is why attacks often arrive without warning. Not because power is greater, but because timing was correct. Rituals are scheduled to intersect human weakness, sleep cycles, emotional transitions, and moments of distraction. Precision matters more than intensity. A small action at the right hour outweighs loud effort at the wrong one. Many prayers fail for a simple reason. They ignore timing. Words are spoken sincerely, yet outside the window where authority carries weight. Effort is present, but alignment is absent. Spiritual realms do not respond to desperation. They respond to structure. Noise feels powerful to the human ear. It creates emotional release, yet noise without order produces little effect beyond the moment. The spiritual realm listens for position, not volume. Calm authority travels farther than frantic speech. Discipline opens doors that passion alone cannot touch. Order is the language of spiritual power. Every realm recognizes it. Darkness relies on it. Light enforces it. When order is established, confusion collapses. When order is ignored, interference multiplies. This is why consistent timing frustrates dark systems. It removes unpredictability. It denies access. Patterns disrupt monitoring. Scheduled prayer interrupts scheduled attacks. Spiritual authority is not proven by how intense a moment feels. It is proven by when an action is taken. Right timing seals decisions before opposition gathers. Wrong timing allows resistance to settle in. This truth is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It requires discipline. It demands awareness. Yet, those who learn timing stop reacting. They begin intercepting. They no longer chase peace. They establish it. Most attacks unfold when awareness drops, not because a person is weak, but because attention has shifted elsewhere. The mind relaxes, the body slows, defenses lower without conscious permission. This is the preferred moment. Not chaos, not crisis, calm. Assignments are not released at random. They are positioned, timed, calculated to intersect ordinary human rhythms. Sleep cycles become entry points. Emotional fatigue becomes leverage. Repetition becomes erosion. Nothing dramatic is required. Subtlety is far more effective. Night creates psychological openness. Thought patterns loosen. The boundary between conscious choice and passive reception thins. This is why interference often begins during rest. Dreams distort. Waking thoughts feel heavy. Motivation dulls without explanation. The individual searches for a natural cause and rarely suspects timing. Emotion is the second access point. Not extreme emotion, but unresolved emotion. The quiet resentment, the unspoken fear, the fatigue that never fully lifts. Assignments feed on unfinished internal processes. They attach to loops already running. No force is needed when momentum exists. Attention is the final target. Focus determines direction. Direction determines outcome. When attention fragments, authority disperses. Small distractions weaken coherence. Over time, confusion feels personal rather than imposed. This misinterpretation is critical. Once a person internalizes the disturbance, resistance dissolves. Unawareness is the common thread. Attacks succeed not because power is overwhelming, but because perception is delayed. By the time the pattern is noticed, it feels familiar, normal, accepted. This is the genius of scheduling. A system that waits for blindness rather than confrontation conserves energy. It avoids conflict. It bypasses defense. It enters through routine rather than resistance. Understanding this reframes the struggle. The issue is rarely intensity, it is timing. Awareness placed at the right moment interrupts the sequence before it consolidates. Once the sequence breaks, the assignment loses coherence, and without coherence, it cannot remain. God honors structure and alignment. That statement unsettles modern spirituality because it introduces responsibility. Structure implies order. Alignment implies precision. Neither allows randomness. The idea that prayer can be offered without regard to timing sounds comforting, yet comfort is not the same as effectiveness. The teaching to pray anytime removes urgency from watchfulness. It suggests that intention alone overrides order. But spiritual systems are not governed by sentiment. They are governed by alignment. When structure is ignored, gaps form. These gaps are not moral failures. They are structural weaknesses. And every structure once weakened invites pressure. A watch exists for a reason. It marks transitions. It guards thresholds. When watches are abandoned, boundaries blur. The spiritual realm recognizes this immediately, not with aggression, but with access. Access does not require permission when alignment is absent. This is why well-meaning people remain spiritually exposed while praying consistently. They are active yet misaligned, engaged yet unpositioned. The action is sincere, but the placement is ineffective. Prayer becomes expressive rather than authoritative. Alignment concentrates authority. It focuses intent into a narrow channel where resistance cannot disperse it. Without alignment, effort spreads thin, noise increases, results diminish. The individual compensates by increasing intensity, unaware that intensity without structure exhausts rather than strengthens. God's order is not restrictive, it is protective. Structure does not limit freedom, it preserves it. Boundaries do not suffocate power. They direct it. Every system that endures operates this way. The spiritual realm is no different. When watch times are ignored, prayer becomes reactive. Always late. Always responding. Alignment shifts prayer into anticipation, into interception, into quiet authority that speaks before disruption manifests. This perspective challenges convenience. It replaces spontaneity with discipline, yet discipline produces stability. Stability produces clarity, and clarity restores authority. Those who understand structure stop asking why resistance persists. They see where alignment is missing. They adjust position rather than volume, and in that adjustment, gaps close. Prayers offered in this hour create disruption because they enter a realm already in motion. The dark realm does not expect resistance here. It expects compliance through sleep, through unconsciousness, through absence. When prayer appears instead, the system destabilizes. Panic is not emotional. Panic is structural. It signals that an operation has been interrupted where interruption was not planned. Deep night is not empty. It is organized. Activity increases because observation decreases. Human awareness withdraws, and spiritual processes intensify. Thought slows. Defenses soften. The boundary between intention and reception thins. This is why the night is favored, not because it is mysterious, but because it is efficient. Dark rituals rely on predictability. They assume rest. They assume silence. They assume the mind is offline. When prayer enters during this window, it introduces a variable the system cannot easily compensate for. Authority spoken here carries disproportionate weight because it meets resistance at its point of coordination. This hour exposes hierarchy. The spiritual realm responds faster because fewer distractions compete for attention. Signals travel cleaner. Decisions register deeper. Prayer spoken calmly during deep night does not echo. It strikes. It reaches mechanisms rather than surfaces. Panic follows because control depends on sequence. Once the sequence is disrupted, everything downstream becomes unstable. Monitoring weakens. Assignments lose timing. Momentum collapses. Recovery requires more energy than the system anticipated. This is why opposition resists consistency at this hour. Once prayer becomes patterned here, access closes, surveillance fails, predictive models collapse. The system is forced into reaction rather than initiation. Deep night prayer does not shout. It asserts presence where absence was assumed. It introduces light into a structure built around darkness, not as symbolism but as function. When authority occupies that space, darkness must either retreat or reorganize. Reorganization takes time. Time creates delay. Delay exposes intent. And exposure dismantles power that relies on secrecy. This is why panic emerges, not because prayer is loud, but because it arrives precisely where it was never meant to be. Authority is recognized faster at this hour because competition for attention has collapsed. The mind is no longer fragmented by stimulus. Internal dialogue slows, emotional noise recedes. What remains is presence. Presence carries weight in the spiritual realm. It signals coherence rather than reaction. When the mind grows quiet, intention sharpens. Words are fewer, but meaning concentrates. This is not passivity, it is alignment. In that alignment, authority becomes legible. The spiritual realm responds to clarity more readily than force. Signals that are clean travel farther. Commands that are unconflicted register deeper. At this hour, activity does not decrease. It reorganizes. With human awareness withdrawn, non-physical processes intensify. Systems that depend on distraction begin to operate openly. This openness is not weakness, but exposure. Exposure invites intervention. Authority moves faster here because it encounters less interference. During the day, intention must push through layers of thought, emotion, and competing focus. At night, these layers thin, direction becomes direct. Prayer does not need to overcome internal resistance before addressing external opposition. Recognition follows structure. Calm assertion carries legitimacy. The absence of urgency communicates control. The spiritual realm reads this instantly. Panic and desperation signal instability. Stability signals dominance. At this hour, stability is easier to achieve because the mind is no longer fighting itself. This is why brief, disciplined prayer here outperforms extended effort elsewhere. Not because of duration, but because of precision. A single aligned declaration can dismantle complex interference when spoken into a quiet internal landscape. Speed matters. Authority that arrives early shapes outcomes. Authority that arrives late negotiates damage. This hour favors initiation over response. It allows presence to precede disruption. Those who understand this stop striving for emotional intensity. They cultivate stillness. Stillness reveals position. Position establishes authority, and once authority is established, recognition is immediate. The mind's quiet is not emptiness. It is readiness. In that readiness, the spiritual realm does not debate. It acknowledges, and acknowledging is the beginning of change. This hour functions as a sealing and reversal window because it closes what the night attempted to open. The transition into morning is not merely biological. It is structural. Decisions made here lock trajectories. Intentions spoken here set direction before momentum hardens. In this space, authority does not argue with what occurred overnight. It overrides it. Reversal becomes possible because sequences are still soft. Assignments released in darkness have not fully integrated into action. They remain provisional. This hour interrupts that integration. It declares a different outcome before the day consents to move. Once movement begins, resistance increases. Before movement, change is efficient. This is why witches avoid this hour. It dismantles work without confrontation. It exposes operations to light before concealment stabilizes. Rituals performed in the night rely on follow-through during the day. Morning prayer disrupts that follow-through. It seals doors before activity can justify presence. The spiritual reset occurs because attention returns. Consciousness rises. Choice re-enters the system. With choice comes authority. The individual is no longer passive. The day has not yet claimed ownership. This moment belongs to whoever speaks first with alignment. Sealing here is preventative, not reactive. It establishes boundaries rather than repairing damage. Reversal here does not require force because the system has not yet committed. It is persuaded by order rather than challenged by conflict. This hour favors clarity over emotion. The mind is alert but unburdened. The body is awake but unentangled. In this state, prayer functions as a directive rather than a request. Direction alters probability. Probability alters outcome. Dark systems depend on delay. They rely on momentum carrying assignments forward unnoticed. Morning prayer shortens that delay. It names interference before it becomes familiar. Familiarity is power's ally. Exposure is its enemy. Those who understand this hour stop chasing breakthrough later in the day. They establish it early. They do not fight resistance. They prevent it. The day unfolds according to what was sealed before it began. This hour establishes spiritual permission for the day. Because authority spoken here precedes activity. Nothing significant unfolds without permission, whether acknowledged or not. When permission is granted intentionally, the day. When it is absent, other permissions attempt to fill the vacuum. Decisions gain clarity because interference has been named before options present themselves. The mind recognizes direction without strain. Choices feel obvious rather than conflicted. This is not coincidence. It is the result of alignment established before external pressures arrive. Movements follow order when permission is set early. Travel, conversations, transitions, and pauses occur within boundaries rather than chance. Delays lose their grip. Distractions fail to attach. The day becomes less reactive, not because obstacles disappear, but because authority defines response. Meetings are affected in subtle but decisive ways. Words land differently, agendas shift, resistance softens or reveals itself early enough to avoid entanglement. People sense clarity and adjust unconsciously. This is how spiritual permission manifests. Quietly, systemically. Assignments planned overnight depend on daylight participation. They require cooperation through distraction, emotion, or misdirection. Morning authority denies that cooperation. It intercepts before engagement. Interception is more powerful than confrontation because it prevents formation rather than dismantling structure. This is why the day feels lighter when alignment is set early, not because effort decreases, but because friction does. Energy once spent managing confusion becomes available for purpose, focus sharpens, fatigue lessens. Permission spoken here establishes jurisdiction. It declares who governs the day before competing influences arrive. Jurisdiction determines outcome. Without it, external pressures negotiate access. With it, access is regulated. This understanding reframes prayer from reaction to governance. Prayer becomes a positioning act rather than an emergency measure. Authority exercised early reshapes the entire sequence that follows. Those who practice this stop asking why chaos repeats. They see where permission was never established. They correct position rather than blame circumstance. And in that correction, the day unfolds under order rather than interruption. Evening prayer shuts doors before night opens because transitions invite access. The movement from activity to rest is not neutral. It is porous. Attention loosens. Emotional residue from the day lingers without resolution. Fatigue lowers resistance, not through weakness but through depletion. Systems recognize this instantly. Emotional fatigue is especially valuable to interference. It does not need to overwhelm. It only needs to blur. When clarity fades, small intrusions pass unnoticed. Irritation feels justified. Discouragement feels earned. The mind attributes disturbance to the day itself rather than to timing. This misattribution is critical. It normalizes what should be questioned. Attacks intensify here because transition offers plausible cover. Exhaustion masks intention. Distraction hides sequence. The individual does not guard thresholds when they feel entitled to rest. Yet, thresholds are precisely where structure must be reinforced. Evening prayer reasserts authority at the point of transfer. It acknowledges what occurred without allowing it to carry forward unchecked. It separates experience from identity. The day ends without granting it permission to define the night. Doors close when authority names boundaries, not forcefully. Definitively, closure does not argue with fatigue. It organizes it. It gives the mind a place to release without surrendering position. This moment prevents accumulation. Unaddressed emotion compounds overnight. Thoughts recycle. Dreams distort. Morning clarity diminishes. Evening prayer interrupts the cycle before it begins. It clears residue rather than managing consequences. The spiritual realm respects transitions. It tests them. Evening prayer denies access by sealing the handoff. It declares that the night is not a continuation of struggle, but a separate jurisdiction. This is why consistency here matters. One omission invites familiarity. Familiarity invites normalization. Normalization invites access. Those who practice this do not carry yesterday into tomorrow. They rest without exposure. They sleep without negotiation. Authority remains intact because doors were closed deliberately, not assumed to be closed. Night opens regardless. The question is whether it opens into order or vulnerability. Evening prayer decides that outcome before awareness withdraws. Evening seals because sealing is an act of finality. It declares completion. Without it, exposure and establishment remain unfinished processes. Open systems invite interference. Unfinished cycles attract intrusion. Sealing closes loops that would otherwise remain active through the night. Midnight exposes what hides. Morning establishes what governs. Evening determines what remains accessible. These are not interchangeable functions. Exposure without establishment creates awareness without authority. Establishment without sealing creates direction without protection. Each hour performs a distinct operation within a single system. When one is missing, imbalance forms. Not immediately dramatic, but structurally significant. Gaps appear between awareness and control. Energy leaks through these gaps. Patterns repeat because closure never occurred. The individual senses effort without resolution. Imbalance does not announce itself as danger. It presents as fatigue, as inconsistency, as progress that resets unexpectedly. This confusion stems from partial alignment. Some order exists, but not enough to stabilize outcome. Evening sealing matters because it prevents regression. It preserves what was established earlier. Without sealing, the night reopens questions already answered. Decisions dissolve. Authority weakens through repetition. What should have been settled becomes negotiable again. The spiritual realm operates on continuity. Breaks in sequence invite renegotiation. Midnight exposure reveals issues. Morning authority addresses them. Evening sealing prevents them from resurfacing under cover of darkness. Consistency across all three creates coherence. Coherence produces momentum. Momentum discourages interference because systems prefer efficiency. Interference thrives where structure is incomplete. This framework removes randomness from spiritual struggle. Outcomes become predictable. Stability replaces fluctuation. Authority becomes cumulative rather than episodic. Those who practice only one or two windows feel progress followed by erosion. They fight the same battles repeatedly, not because resistance is stronger, but because cycles remain open. Completion matters. Sealing completes the cycle. It allows rest without vulnerability. It ensures that exposure leads to establishment, and establishment leads to permanence. Without all three, effort scatters. With all three, order consolidates. And once order consolidates, imbalance loses its foothold. Prayer is about position, not volume. Volume attempts to compensate for uncertainty. Position removes the need for compensation. The spiritual realm does not respond to emotional intensity, it responds to coherence. Coherence signals stability. Stability signals authority. Fear destabilizes position. It fragments attention. It accelerates thought without direction. In that state, words multiply while clarity diminishes. Opposition does not need to overpower fear. It only needs to amplify it. Fear feeds systems that rely on reaction because reaction abandons order. Calm authority disrupts assignments because it refuses participation in chaos. It does not mirror pressure. It does not escalate. It occupies space deliberately. This creates a paradox for opposition. Systems designed to provoke response lose leverage when response is absent. Position is established through alignment, not effort. When a person knows where they stand, words arrive measured. Silence carries weight. Boundaries hold without explanation. This posture is legible in the spiritual realm. It communicates jurisdiction. Assignments depend on emotional engagement. They require attention, anxiety, or urgency to sustain momentum. Calm authority withdraws these resources. Without fuel, processes stall. Delay exposes intent. Exposure invites dismantling. This is why shouting often exhausts the speaker while strengthening resistance. Energy disperses outward rather than grounding inward. The individual feels active but remains unpositioned. Opposition reads this immediately. Prayer that flows from position does not argue. It declares. It does not plead. It establishes. Its effectiveness lies not in length, but in placement. A single sentence spoken from alignment can collapse a complex interference pattern. Fear narrows vision. Calm widens it. With widened vision, patterns become visible. Timing becomes apparent. Choice returns. Authority follows. The spiritual realm recognizes hierarchy instantly. Panic places the speaker beneath the pressure they face. Calm places them above it. This is not emotional suppression. It is disciplined presence. Those who understand this stop trying to overpower resistance. They outposition it. They do not chase outcomes. They govern space, and governance changes everything. When prayer shifts from noise to position, opposition loses relevance. It cannot attach where authority is settled, and once authority settles, fear has nothing left to feed. Consistency dismantles systems that rely on observation. Monitoring spirits depend on unpredictability. They study gaps. They wait for irregularity. When prayer becomes patterned, surveillance loses value. There is nothing new to report, nothing open to exploit. Patterns remove access because access requires variation. Randomness creates entry points, discipline closes them. When actions repeat with intention, the environment stabilizes. Stability denies permission. What cannot adapt cannot remain. This is why discipline is more dangerous than shouting. Shouting signals urgency. Discipline signals control. Control cannot be manipulated. It does not react, it governs. Over time, authority compounds. Resistance weakens without confrontation. This teaching is not about fear, it is about order. When order is restored, interference collapses naturally. No struggle, no escalation, just quiet dominance through alignment. If this message brought clarity, support this work. Like this video so it reaches those who need understanding, not panic. Subscribe to Holy Authority and remain connected to teachings that build calm authority, sharpen discernment, and establish lasting spiritual order.